So you watched Collei's basics guides like 5 days ago now because I have not been feeling good. By the way, my hair's green. It's going to be interesting to see if the green screen picks it up, or if it blends in with the green screen. But after watching that guide, you're wondering what kind of teams Collei can be good in. In this video, we're going to look at 3 different teams for Collei and how you can use her. You are given her for free in Genshin, so it's a great tool. She's a great character to kind of utilize at any point in the game. I really like Collei. I used Collei a lot before I got Nahida. So let's look at a couple of different teams, 3 different teams for Collei. And for this one, we're going to start out with Keqing, Collei, Sheilinin, and Furina. This is going to be a quick bloom team, and this is going to kind of be a version of my Alhaitham Chiori team, that the same principles apply for this team. Yes, Cyan, I had to mention it. You know I always have to mention it. Now this team is going to be using Collei as an off-field Dendro applicator, not so much for her own personal damage. Now she will hit a fair good amount of damage. Now this is the same Collei build from the last one. I believe it was 2-piece Deepwood and 2-piece Golden Troop. I haven't changed her build since that video. So she's going to be filling this role with that build. She's going to be doing a lot of off-field Dendro application. Collei and Keqing work together really well because of the boomerang that Collei throws out whenever it hits an enemy, as long as you cause a reaction before it returns. Actually, I think with her cons, you don't even have to cause a reaction. It'll still just spin around. Keqing has to be near enemies whenever she is doing her normal attacks and her charge attacks, because that's where most of her damage comes from. So Collei's boomerang spinning around Keqing actually works really well, especially if you don't have somebody like Nahida that applies a lot of ranged Dendro application, right? This is going to also work really well with timing, where Collei's boomerang spinning around is going to work fairly well with the amount of electro infusion that Keqing has. Now, of course, adding somebody like Furina in there, we're going to create some blooms. So this is going to be a quick bloom team where Keqing is going to be triggering the hyper blooms as well as the quicken and aggravate. And then Sheilinin is in there for a little bit of health, but to also make the enemies weaker. Now, Collei's burst can also work really well with Keqing's burst, where you're going to drop Collei's burst, then you're going to go to Keqing, you're going to use Keqing's burst, and you're going to have aggravated reactions through the full duration of Keqing's burst, which is where that last little slash is where you get a lot of damage from Keqing. So this is actually going to be a really good 2 characters, Keqing and Collei, that work together really well. And I do plan on building a full Keqing team with Keqing and Collei at the center, because as we know, Nahida does not leave my Bountiful Core team. Now, if we wanted to take this quick bloom team and turn it much more into a pure aggravate team, then we could take Furina out and put somebody in like C6 Sara. Now, during this, I forgot that I took Sara's weapon off of her and gave it to Collei. So Sara's not going to be buffing Keqing that much, but you can still do this team. You could also put in Fischl for Sara, or another Dendro character like Yao Yao. If you want an extra healer, or Kirara for shielder, you could also do that, still letting Keqing do most of your damage. Sara is just going to buff Keqing in this instance. Now, again, in this team, Collei is going to be doing most of her off-field Dendro application. That's really where Collei is actually pretty good, is she does do a lot of off-field Dendro application. She's not going to be too good with like Sethos, where Sethos wants range, right? Collei's boomerang spins around your character that's on field, so that's why she works really well with Keqing, because Keqing has to be near the enemies for her normal attacks and charge attacks, because that's where Keqing gets a lot of her damage. So she's not going to work super well with other bow users or range users. She's going to work really well with the characters that want to be close up to your enemies if you're using her for off-field Dendro support. Now, the artifact set that I have on Collei currently would actually be better for this aggravate team, where we want her damage to go up. If you were to run her in like a quick bloom team or a pure hyper blue team or something like that, then you might want to throw 4-piece Deepwoods on her to make the enemies weaker to the hyper blue. Now, for another team that we are going to talk about is going to be Collei in a Nilou Bountiful Core team. And for that, we're actually going to swap all of her artifacts over to EM build, because we want all of our characters except for Nilou to be full EM build, at least how I play Bountiful Core. So we're going to give Collei stringless, and then we're going to give her my Yao Yao's artifact sets, just to give her as much EM as we can get her. And that is going to put her a little bit above 1,000 EM right now before we start activating Ki and Nahida's passives. Now, Collei is going to apply a ton of Dendro in this team. You do need to make sure that you have enough ER on her, or at least enough energy kind of going around to where she can use her burst a lot, because she reapplies a ton of Dendro and creates a ton of blooms during her burst. And we want to be able to use that as often as possible, especially if you don't have Nahida. Bountiful Core is doable without Nahida. Of course, it's not doable without Nilou, but it is doable without Nahida and then even without like Kokomi, right? You can do it with 4-star characters as your bloom creators. And in this, I can actually go through and just use Collei and still produce a ton of blooms. Using Coco's Jellyfish and then Collei's Burst, anything that walks into that burst field, as long as the jellyfish is placed in a good spot, is going to have blooms made off of it, and it's just going to be doing a ton of damage. Of course, the more enemies that you have in the AoE of both of these, the more blooms we're going to have created, the more damage that we're going to do. Bountiful Core works beautifully against a bunch of enemies, not as beautifully against like a single enemy. I'm looking at you, Chamber 12, first floor, front half of the Abyss. If you've been watching my past videos, you know my struggles on that. But Collei can do very, very well in a Bountiful Core team. The only problem is that because Collei does not heal where Yao Yao heals, which Yao Yao is the standard, or Baizhu is the standard slot or character for that slot, Collei does not heal. So it would almost be better to not run Nahida. At that point, you might have to have Coco built for healing versus EM, because Bountiful Cores do self-damage, so you're going to be losing a lot of HP, and it's really hard to do without 2 healers. So at that point, you might need to run like Nilou, Baizhu or Yao Yao, Collei, and then Coco or Barbara for your final slots. So that way you have enough healing to keep your team healthy, because the blooms hurt you a lot. And to kind of end it off, we're also going to show how she would work with like a second Dendro user, right? To just kind of create a ton of blooms. Obviously, if we were running a pure Hyper Bloom team, then we would want a lot more Hydro than Farina works with. But my Hathem's on Marshmallow Hunter, and I don't really feel like swapping his build all around just to show off Collei in a Hyper Bloom team. So it would be something similar to this, where we would have like our on-field Dendro applicator, Collei as our off-field Dendro applicator, Kuki being our Electro trigger, as well as a little bit of healing to trigger Marshmallow Hunter on Alhaitham, and then Farina, which Xingqiu would take that spot, or Yelan could take that spot, to where we're having a ton of Dendro and a single character that can do a ton of Hydro application to create enough blooms for Kuki to trigger them. Now, in this particular team, my Kuki does have 4-piece Depoids to make the enemies weaker to Dendro. We could actually put that on Collei, giving Kuki more EM to trigger higher damage Hyper Blooms. So that's kind of how we would have to swap some certain things around. Of course, having Alhaitham to be our main on-field damage dealer. Xingqiu would be our off-field Hydro. Kuki would be giving a little bit of healing just to kind of keep that going, as well as Xingqiu. So we would have a little bit of healing in there, but not a ton. So you do need to be careful about taking damage in a team like this. So that is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, including questions about my hair, I was trying to get it to go to like a more kooky color, but I think we need to add a little bit more yellow into it. It will probably fade closer to that color, but I'm interested to see how it looks with the green screen. If I'm just going to not have half of the head, I might have to pull out the Kazuo wig to kind of make it look more normal, but also less normal, because I'd be wearing a Kazuo wig. We'll see. I am going to return to how I used to end my videos, though, where I used to say Kuki has green hair, Collei has green hair, I have green hair, and I will see you in the next one.